Jamie gave a great introduction, but we'll just reiterate that today is the fourth installment of our program of Bold and Brave Conversations. We had an initial one on breast cancer diagnosis. Our second one was with the partner perspective. We did our last one on disease progression, and we would all encourage you, if you did not participate in those and you're interested, you can certainly head over to the website. Those will all be cataloged, and you can view that at your leisure. Today, as Jamie talked about, we're going to have a little bit different conversation in the sense that we'll try to keep it a lot less medical and more personal, because it is personal, and this conversation is very personal because it's Cynthia and it's Dave, and it's real and it matters, and so we're going to kind of chip away at that and walk through, and certainly we'll address questions that you might have from online. I think otherwise we'll kind of just dig in and see where we go.
Sounds good.
Do you have? Oh, I would like to give one disclaimer. We don't have a professional relationship, so there's no HIPAA lines being crossed.
Right.
There's no concerns that way. This is a conversation between friends. And I would also say that I'm not giving anything that we talked through that's medical. It's very specific to the conversation we're having, so not to be construed as medical advice to anybody other than who's here on set. So those are my disclaimers. That's my intro. I'll pass it over to you, Cynthia,
Sure.
and you, Dave, if you have anything you want to talk about before we.
Yeah, I think as we were talking earlier, I think that, you know, Jamie noted it and you did too. It's we learn and we grow by sharing stories. And because of the friendship, because of the love that we have for one another, and it's going into our private lives as partners, it might be a little, I might learn stuff that I didn't know I did the other night when we were talking about stuff. So that's always fun. But we have agreed that there is no question off limits, that we are willing to share anything that you ask and share our hearts, obviously, with you, as we always do. But we are an open book and want to give free rein to whatever questions that we may discuss, or just the conversation and wherever it goes. We're not trying to pull back anything or hide anything, or it's just we want to be full disclosure tonight.
And let me just say that we're not putting ourselves out here. Cynthia and I are not putting ourselves out as experts on how to live your life or how to best go through this. What we're here to do is to share the experiences that we've had and that we're facing going forward, because as we learned going through diagnosis in some of the early phases, we were so appreciative anytime we got any kind of input and advice from somebody that had been through it. So this is just an extension of what we've done since Project Pink's been out there, and that's to have a network, to help the network understand what they've got in front of them, or what they have what they may be experiencing. So that's what we're here doing.
And I think we can learn from the people that are watching online as well,
Absolutely.
right? It's a two-way street. Like he said, we don't have all the answers. We just have the answers for us that we think we do, and then it changes tomorrow sometimes. But we would love to learn from you. So if there's something that you want to chime in on, to say, hey, have you tried this or consider this, we would love to have your input as well. We all learn from each other, and we certainly don't have any secret sauce. It's just we can only share what we know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good reminder that none of this is black and white.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a big gray area, and what's right in January may not be right in May, and so I mean, it's this whole conversation, these topics, the conclusions, they should always be written in sand rather than stone, because things change, and having that flexibility and the adaptability to meet that challenge of the changing environment, I think is really, and it's something else you guys can speak to, because it's been going on for a long time.
A long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have a starting off point, a jumping point?
Oh, do we? Do you have a starting point? I don't.
I don't either.
Clay, we
So,
hope you have a starting point.
Let's do this. I'm going to just read as far as what we put out there as promoting tonight's topic. I can read these questions. We had some excellent questions that were submitted over the last week or so that could be some kind of guiding light for us as well. I think as the three of us have seen before, once we get into a conversation, it'll feed itself.
Exactly.
And we're going to start going. And then being in front of the camera and talking about really sensitive personal things, I think when we get into it, we'll roll with it, but we'll see what we come up with. So what we posted online was, kind of the questions to query and think about is, are you living your best life? How do you start living your best life if you didn't really do it before? Do you have goals? Are there medical goals? Are there personal goals? Are there familial goals? How do my family and I approach understanding the burden versus benefit conversation? That's worth diving into because it's not often, at least medically, how we pursue decisions and conversations. And so there's a few more. Any of those?
Let's take that one, I think, because of the situation that we're in right now, maybe. And again, we're willing to share where we're at. Things are changing quickly, I'd say, or at least it feels like it, right? So the question was the risk and it was quality of life and
understanding the burden versus benefit, right? The risk versus benefit is what we're all familiar with in medicine and healthcare. And does this surgery make sense? But really, the real conversation, I think, certainly in your situation and in the world that I work in, the conversation is really about burden and benefit.
Yeah. Wow. We have things changed for us significantly. What would you say, about 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, something like that.
6-8 weeks ago. You kind of lose track, quite honestly. And the pain just started ratcheting back up, right? And then you go in and that you find you're in kidney failure or stage 3 kidney failure. And then you find out 2 weeks later that it's stage 4 kidney failure and it's getting worse. So you're presented with what they think they can help with is, hey, we're going to do this minor surgery, put some stents in both ureters to take the pressure off the kidneys because they were inflaming. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't tell me for sure if I would tolerate that because I had heard he had them before and he felt them. And I'm like, having something in my body just freaks me out. I'm going to be honest. But I consulted with all my doctors. They thought it was a small price to pay for the benefit so that we could hopefully not be dealing with kidney failure at the end stage of life. And so that was going on. And so I got down to 20% function before surgery. And had the surgery, and sure enough, one stent drove me crazy. But it was about a week. It wasn't without pain. And the unfortunate part when we talk about burden is this particular surgery, you have to go back in and replace them every 3 months. So every 90 days, I'm going to lose about 10 days of comfort, 7 to 10 days, most likely, because it happened the first time. And when I look at that, that's 10%, right? If you do the calculation. Yep. So I'm like, do I need to do that? Do I really want to do that? And the answer, of course, is no. But then I have to have the conversation with him and say, okay, let's talk through this. All my doctors are advising that it's a low cost, not low cost, but low price to pay. And so we decided to do it, right? Because anytime we make a decision related to quality of life, we not only look at what my quality of life is, but what his quality of life is, because I'm a burden. I'm the burdensome one, right? Like we can all say it in a different way, but at the bottom line, the person that is going through the end of life process is a burden to family and friends. I mean, your caregivers, right? And even though they may accept that and love that and think that it's an honor, it's the hardest thing in my opinion, I've ever done in my life. So went through that, and then simultaneously there's some really bad pain stuff going on because the disease is getting way more, I don't know how it could get more in the bones, but it is. And so we're trying to control that. So then you consider nerve blocks. And then the third thing we're considering is a change in drug regimen that we just had to consider this week. That scares me. I'll be honest, I struggle with narcotics because I don't want to be sick. I can't get past, I seem to have a lot of side effects from medication. My body doesn't like it. And so I struggle with, I want to feel good, but then I want to be strong and not need it so that I don't have to chase side effects and add another medicine to the mix. I can take one pill, and how many am I going to have to take to control those side effects? So with all of that going on, that's where we're at. And so I had to have the hard conversation, and we haven't had to have this too many times, but we seem to have had it more often than not, more frequently in the past, I would say 2 years. I had to have the conversation with my doctor. Are my expectations unrealistic? And that's one I hate asking because I'm always dreading the answer of yeah. And she was great. She just said, your expectations aren't too high, but they're too high for the situation because your situation has changed. Right? So I'm not, yeah, she was just like, they're not too high. You want to live and go walk, do whatever and keep going, and you don't want any, inconvenience, and you want to be 100% you or 110% you. And that's not possible anymore. So we know that had been declining, but to actually hear, yeah, your situation is officially in a different phase. So a lot of stuff going on within 30 days to kind of swallow. So that's where we're at, and how we've got to get through the emotional part of that, I think, and the decisions, and get to the acceptance of, okay, I need to put my fear aside, get all the information that I can. I'm just going to have to take the chance of trying the drug cocktail, right? Because I want to feel better.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll get it right.
So I think there's a lot in there to unpack. It's worth talking about and going through. Lots of kind of the emotional piece. In the beginning, though, you talked about, I think this is a real life example of working through the burden versus benefit conversation, right? And we talked about it before the stents were placed. You're on the other side of the stents. You can now recognize what the burden was, what the benefit was, and so maybe, we can't reproduce our prior conversation that we had off camera, but maybe can you help us walk through that decision as far as, right? Because there is a cost, there is a burden, and nobody can really tell you exactly what it's going to be until it happens. We can say, here's what typically it looks like, here's what you should likely prepare for. That one is tough because the burden isn't necessarily the benefit is not necessarily palpable, right? The benefit is you prevented something from worsening.
Right.
But it
you
didn't.
Hope.
Right. But it didn't. You didn't walk out of there, or even a week later, and say, "I feel
better."
Right.
No, you didn't. And that was a hard one. I struggled. You didn't. I struggled because I'll be honest, I flat out said, no, I don't want to do this. I do not want to do this. I even went as far as to say, you know what, is death by kidney failure worse or better than what I might be handed? I'm like, I know that sounds horrible, but I'm like, is this such a bad thing? Or maybe it may not even come to fruition. Maybe it stays right where it's at, but
right.
it was declining. Right. And what I needed to do, and what we did do, because he, being the logical person that he is, said, let's do your kidney function labs again. And if they're down, I think you should do them. And they were already down another 10%. So in 1 week. So I think it was a week, maybe 2.
Yeah.
So he knew I didn't want to do it, but he brought the logic into it to get me there. And that's how we made the decision. I knew I wasn't going to like it because it took me, and this did surprise me. I usually, we had not been together in that setting. This is what surprised us. I think I'll share.
Uh-oh. What?
When we were
Oh.
in pre-op, and it was like PTSD almost, because we had not been in that situation since early on in the diagnosis with the mastectomy and the hysterectomy.
Yep.
And so it made both of us, I don't want to speak how you felt, but I was a wreck. And I'm normally on that kind of stuff, like, whatever. I mean, I went into my mastectomy, I was like, whatever. Not that it's not a big deal, but I don't typically get afraid of that stuff. And I wasn't afraid, but I couldn't put my finger on why it was emotional. I was really emotional. Really unlike me at all in a situation like that. So I don't know. I think it was just a matter of going back to that place and also looking at him. And even though he tries to not look worried, your loved ones try, but he was like, is this going to work? Is this the right thing? He never wants to pressure me into anything, but when he knows it's right, he'll go a pretty long way. So that surprised us. That was not a good experience.
Yeah, I think that the whole thing with the kidneys surprised us both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were kind of ready for some of the other traditional things, if you want to look at them that way. And we expected those and felt like we knew how to react, in that we would either do something or not do something based on conversations we'd had. So, but with the kidneys, it was just, what is the plan for this?
Yeah.
But we've had enough conversations so that I've got what I think is a clear picture of what she wants and how she wants to live until she's gone, and the kidney failure just wasn't in the middle of that.
It was nowhere on the radar.
It's a good example, right, where we can have really great conversations. You can have advanced directives. You can have a living will. You cannot possibly plan for all contingencies.
And
Yeah.
that's hard.
But
Yeah,
but
we
I
were
think,
laughing about
right, and
that.
it is hard because now you have something you're like, well, we didn't talk about that, but
Yeah.
but you've had. I mean, you guys are in really an ideal position to go through what you're going through because you're having, and you've had for a long time, real frank conversations.
Yep.
And while you never talked about that particular issue,
Yeah.
you learn enough about the goals, the wishes, the desires, the things to avoid, that you can extrapolate that and begin to apply it to things that you didn't predict.
No, that's a great point, because that's your point is why I felt so strongly about going forward with the kidney stents, because there wasn't anything that they were describing that was going to make it so that her life was diminished, or that she wasn't able to do the things
Right.
that made her life worth living. It was all on the positive side as far as I was concerned, other than the fact that she really doesn't like to have, like she said, anything that they put in there is not a good thing. Because she just can't. I was afraid she'd be in a place where she just couldn't quit thinking about it, which would be tough. But
You could feel it, but it subsided. It just took 10 days to subside.
So in hindsight, the benefit far outweighed the burden.
I'd say that it outweighed it. I think the jury is still out that did it far outweigh it.
Okay.
So we got a little bit of improvement, not what the doctor had hoped for, but there might be some different circumstances. And it usually does take my body, no matter whether it's medicine, radiation, or whatever, it takes it some time to react. I'm a slow reactor, and that's been known from the very beginning. And so I'm hopeful, but at least it went up. The function went up by 20%. So was that worth 10 days of discomfort if it saves a headache and complication during end of life? Yeah, it was. Yeah, I can suck it up.
I would say nothing we ever do to people or for people in the medical world, especially when you're talking procedures and pieces of plastic in places it doesn't belong. And I mean, none of that should be taken lightly. but there are certainly varying degrees of invasiveness and
Right.
intensity of the procedure and the
Right.
recovery. And, we talked about it. I mean, I think the potential benefit of that procedure was worth it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
if somebody, for whatever reason, is going to put out the option of, a major surgery, right? Intra-abdominal
Yeah.
surgery, that's a totally
Yeah.
different conversation. Not to say somebody shouldn't pursue that, but it is a different
Mhm.
burden, significally different burden.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
And, in that situation, you might want to have a little clearer idea of what the potential benefits may be, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the benefits of the stent is in one situation is not a worsening,
Right.
but it's not that's not something necessarily that you perceive, right? That's
Mhm.
just by the numbers.
Yeah.
And part of the reason we scrambled is because neither one of us had contemplated it, so we
Right.
weren't as well versed on, okay, what's an end driven by kidney failure like versus what we thought we were already facing. So,
Yeah, it was just something out of the blue, and we're both planners, and it's just a joke. Like, right, you can plan, like you said, and I think all that planning is important. But there's stuff that it certainly slapped us a little bit to say, yeah, plan all you want, but just gonna make sure you know that you're not gonna be able to plan for anything.
And we talked about what a kidney failure end of life looks like.
Yeah.
But to me, I was struggling with the timing,
Yeah.
because if you look at how functional and active you are
Mhm.
when that decision came on the table, versus looking at a maybe rapidly progressing, it didn't, the time frame didn't match the disease. And so, as we were talking through, that's my thought is, if it's a fairly easy thing to go through, I say that, well, I haven't been through it, but you potentially get quite a bit of benefit from a time frame.
Right.
I would use the example, sometimes we talk about hospice, that chasing infections doesn't always make a lot of sense because they
Right.
tend to occur. But if somebody is otherwise doing quite well and they get a pneumonia or urinary tract infection, and you could treat that with just an oral pill for 7 days, that makes perfect sense, right? That's not that burdensome, but the value is fairly significant. So yeah, that was a great, I'm glad that you went into that, because I think that's a really good real life example of how to start to think through the burden versus benefit, right? And it's different for everybody.
and part of our perspective on burden versus benefit comes from life experience, like it does for everybody.
Right.
And Cynthia's folks having passed how many years ago? 6 years ago. It was a tough situation for Cynthia, and what she saw in how their doctors treated them was help her make decisions about how she wanted to deal with the things that she was going to be facing. She wasn't going to chase cures or treatments right to the last day, kind of thing. So.
I think that the very true. I said, oh gosh, I think a couple of years ago there was an interview, and I said it so wrong, because I said I feel like my mom taught me how to die, but really I should have said my mom taught me how to live, right? Because she taught me to live until I die, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know when that day is, but she did. She chose her path and said, these are what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do, and I'm willing to accept the consequences. And she was firm on that. She never questioned that, and she lived, and she got up, and if it was a good day, it was a good day. If it was a bad day, it was a bad day, and she made no apologies. I struggle with that, but she was such a beautiful example for me personally. So I'm forever grateful for that. I don't know that I will live up to the way as good as she was, but I think the burden benefit, another example that kind of like the stent thing with the kidneys was a struggle, but I think the thing I struggle with the most and have since day one, and we've talked about it a little bit, is the whole medicine thing, right? Like, I really struggle, and we were faced with doing a different drug cocktail this week that just freaks me out. It just freaks me out. And even though I can intellectually understand that, okay, the half-life of that drug is going to be out of my system in 12 hours, I'm selfish. I don't want to lose 1 hour of feeling bad when I feel so bad anyway, right? Like, I don't want to be puking. I don't want to have this side effect. So I think that that's a struggle for me emotionally, to try stuff even though I know it will go out of my system, and to know that it's stronger, and to know that, okay, I don't want to not know how it's going to impact me, and I don't want to be asleep at the wheel, right? So we're entering that phase officially now of managing the symptoms through medication that will be significant pain management meds and others as well. And there's a price to pay, and we aren't there. We don't know that yet. And so we're on that journey, and that's a hard one for me. I hope I'm not alone in that, but I know it's a struggle.
No, you're not alone in that. I mean, that's a very common thing, whether those perceptions are misperceptions or based in prior experience, or people come to the table with all sorts of things. And it's another burden versus benefit conversation. I think, though, I would say that the use of meds for symptom management does not guarantee that side effects come with those medications, right? I'll come to that. I'll get that in just one second. But I think you clearly have had some experiences that a particular med caused nausea. And so there it's like, well, which one's worse, right? I mean, take the symptom that I'm trying to treat, or take the symptom I created by trying to treat the first one. And that certainly happens sometimes. And they're right. There are other meds to treat the side effects. And sometimes that's the position we get into, because comfort is taking front seat. But I would also say that it's certainly not a guarantee, right? I mean, a perfect therapeutic is 100% effective, 0 side effects, perfectly safe and free, right? Yeah. That doesn't exist. We're not smart enough yet to have figured out, for any disease at any stage, that type of therapeutic. So there are costs associated with that. Lots of times it's dose dependent. Lots of times, it is a trial and error. It's not experimentation, but it's trial and error. And we might say, well, let's start low and go slow, right? Absence of any crisis, where you're in a good position to say, we'll start down here, and let's see, number one, what side effects come from it, and number two, what benefit from the symptom you're trying to manage. And then it is a constant decision about what's more important to you, right? And
that's exhausting, because at least from a survivor perspective, it's just like, oh my gosh, okay, so how many times are we going to tweak this? Because I don't want to waste time, right? So
let me just say that her concern for what kinds of painkillers and those kinds of things are used doesn't translate to her caregiving. I recall vividly coming out of the fog of a general anesthetic from having my knees replaced and having her talk to the doctors about pushing more of that pain medicine.
Like, he needs pain medicine. He needs anti-nausea.
Give him more of that.
Give him all of that. He needs to be comfortable. So it's easier to do it to someone else.
Do what I say, not what
exactly.
I do.
I'm guilty.
Right.
I'm guilty. Yeah.
Right.
Guilty.
Because that's the intellectual versus the emotional situation. Right? Intellectually, you understand.
I do.
That these things, there is benefit. There's real benefit.
There is. It's just
but it's a scary thing, especially when you've lived a life and not taken pharmaceuticals. Yep. To enter a stage where those things start to serve real purpose is hard. So there's a question that it kind of fits into this. So the question is, at the end of life, what is one more complication, right? And are we talking about these interventions extending life or improving quality of life at the end? I'll take the second two, and I'll give you the first one.
Okay. What was the first one then?
The first one is, so you've got another complication.
One more. At the end of life, what is
essentially,
one more complication?
it's another one
Because why am I worried about one more complication? Because I am selfish maybe, and maybe I want more than I can have, but I want to be I look at it this way, and I feel like everybody's got a gas tank, right? 15 gallon, 30 gallon, whatever you want to do. And you know how you can tap it off and keep going until it just like totally spills out, and I'm guilty of doing that. I try to get every ounce of gas in there, right? Because I want to be, and I equate that to myself, is I want to be 110% whatever I do, right? Like 110% in life, no matter what it is I'm doing. Not that even I have to be good at it. I just want to put 110% effort in. I can't change that. That's who I am. That doesn't change just because I'm at the end of my life. Yeah. So what's frustrating for me is that I'm not that anymore. And so when you've been battling metastatic disease for 6 years, it's diminished, and it's been, you said this perfectly, a slow burn for 6 years. But now that burn's getting faster. But just because I'm at the end of my life, I don't want any more complications. I mean, like, why would I? I want my cake. I want to eat it too. I want to live. I want to be my best me that I can be. And honestly, I'm not. And I will not be. I'm the best that I can be, but it's not satisfactory to me at all. I would say I am 40% of who I was 6 years ago, right? Like if I had to would you say that's a fair percentage? 40%. That's failure to me.
Are you speaking functionally?
Yeah, functionally. I'm 40%. I am, when you have to be either asleep, not very often, but asleep, by the time you do 8 hours of sleep, which you never get, or I don't, but regardless, you're in the bed. You have to get horizontal because the pain is so bad, and that's part of pain management, because you can't be unrealistic. I can't just pop a pain pill and think I'm going to go walk 10 miles. That doesn't happen. For me, it doesn't. I don't know about anyone else. To recognize that I have to rest and conserve energy because I knew I was doing this tonight. Well, I probably overdid it because I worked too hard yesterday. Lesson learned, I'm really probably should only be doing every other day. That to me is the hardest thing for me. It's functionally losing a piece of who I am, what I want to be, what I want to give.
And we're, after 25 years or more together, we've assimilated a lot of each other's perspectives on stuff. And one of the things that Cynthia and I talk about every once in a while, it's like, tell me what I'm facing and let me understand that. Yeah. And I can handle that. If you tell me what I need to do to get through to manage that stuff, I can handle it. And the one more complication question comes in of that's just way more than I can handle. Even though it's, if I'd had that up front, maybe I could have worked it into what it is that I need to manage to get through today or this month or this year or whatever. But the just one more thing just feels like it's too much. I mean, and that's,
yeah, it's,
I can handle this much, but not anymore. I can be in a meeting for 3 hours, but I can't do 3 hours and 10 minutes. Yep. It's like, it was just, it doesn't have to make sense. It's just, that's how I cope with stuff, is managing to the things I know I'm facing.
And you want to put your best foot forward. You're not faking it, right? Like, I'm not trying to fake anything, but I want to be present and 100% present. Even if I only get that 1 hour that day, I want to be 100% that day for that 1 hour. And so, I mean, one of the diminishing returns is what we were talking about earlier. It's like you just diminish and diminish and diminish. And it's like, what next? What next? And it's like, and we all know, I mean, I stepped down from president of Project Paint because I no longer have the energy level to be able to do that. And thank God Dave has, stepped in, and our board's amazing, and our staff. But did I want to do that? Heck no, I didn't want to do that. So it feels like you're being robbed and you don't get a say in it. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. So it's a total mind screw. especially when you're who you are. And when you're type A, it doesn't matter what type, but for me, so even at this part where I'm 40% functional, it's a challenge because I try so hard to, okay, I'm going to plan this because I'm going to have the energy, but some days I can plan it, but I wake up and the energy's not there. So it's unpredictable. So even when you try to plan, we're now at a phase where nothing's predictable. So yeah, it's like, that part sucks.
Yep.
I think going back to the one more complication, it is about quality of life, right? It's certainly in the conversation we're having now, and in the place that I meet my patients, it is about quality of life, and it is maybe just one more complication that piles on to 27 other complications, but people want to feel as good as possible. Yeah. And while it is one more, it's one more, right? And I want to circle back around though, because I don't want people to have the perception that medication equals less of you. I'm not a pill taker. I find all solutions other than pharmacology, although I write lots and lots and lots of pharmacology, because when we're talking about symptom management at the end of life, I'll bring in acupuncture, you can bring in homeopathy, you can bring in osteopathy, you can bring in whatever it is you want. All of those things bring some value to the table. Yep. But so does pharmacology. And so there are people out there on lots and lots of opiates. Let's use opiates for example. Yeah. Who are still out playing golf, who are still going to work, who do not recognize any cognitive decline or changes, don't recognize any lethargy from the meds. So that exists, right? There are people out there who have just significant side effects, and we might try a different med. We might at that point add another med to treat the side effect. But again, it's if the goal is comfort, the goal is never taking anything away. The goal is trying to provide as much quality of life and comfort and peace and dignity with the tools that our culture currently has. I wish that we had perfect therapeutics, right?
Yeah. Me too.
But those tools can be very, very successful and very useful. And there is no automatic side effect. Okay. The profiles, the side effect concern exists, but it's not a guarantee. So I would encourage you and anybody else you can be skeptical. You can walk judiciously and with a cognizant approach of what your goals are, but I wouldn't shut the door on that tool altogether, because it is a useful tool.
Yeah, and we're to the point there's no choice, because you can't live at this level. I mean, like when you get to a 9, you can't live that. I mean, I literally sent her a message and said, "Uncle, I'm there. I don't know what we need to do, but Uncle," and then wrote out what my day looked like, and I'm like, this is unacceptable to me, right? Like I can't be in the bed I was only up and able to function 2 or 3 hours. And it's just like, no, I want more. Yep. But then having that scary conversation with her of saying, is this all I'm going to get? And it's not, because we haven't even gone down that deep, huge pain, med management at the level that we're having to go to. I just will, I will struggle and we'll work through it, but it's new and it's scary and it's wanting not to be asleep.
Yeah, and I don't say that to you as a judgment by any
means.
I
know you
because, don't. Right. I mean, if you came to me and said, "Hey, take these pills,"
yeah, exactly.
I'll figure it out.
Tylenol's it. Yeah.
So it's another example of, do as I say, not as I do.
Yep, I'm good at that.
So, and there was one more question before I get to that one that we didn't address. And are we talking about quality of life or extending the length of life? I mean, the things I think we're talking about tonight are really, really quality of life.
Yeah.
You could make the argument that the stents that you went through lengthened your life, but I don't think it was recommended or pursued with that intent.
No, it was recommended just so that they don't, we've defied all odds on time frame. And so it's like, do you really want to have this complication
Right.
when you're going through fighting the cancer complications that you're going to have? Because with liver and, like with with wherever the brain, the liver, the adrenal, it's just more for comfort, because the symptoms were going to get worse and they make you tired, right? If your kidneys aren't functioning. But I wasn't having major symptoms, but when we looked it up, I'm like, no wonder I've been waking up every night with leg and foot cramps.
Right.
Some of it made sense, but we weren't even aware. We just thought,
So it really was a quality. It was a
quality.
symptom management once you
Yes.
once you were able to look in hindsight.
Yes.
And it was a little bit reactive because you found something and then we had to figure out what to do with it. But it was also a little bit preventative or prophylactic in the sense that it was a goal of trying to prevent a worsening of something.
Exactly.
But in my mind, that all falls into a quality of life. Even though I think that the result was an extended length of life, because you got to eliminate that complication, right? It's another complication, but if you can fix it and get rid of that complication,
why not?
Depending on what you have to go through to achieve that. But okay, so Cynthia does a great job living her best life even now. How do I start to do that when I never knew how before?
I guess I've always tried to live my best life, so it's hard for me to I'm not in the same position as someone that wasn't living their best life before, right? But there's no better time to start than now. And I know that sounds so cliche, but want more, because you're given breath, you're given a day, and for me, it's another day to love you, or to serve our community, or to help a survivor. It is another way to find joy, and you do. There is joy in suffering, there is joy in serving, and there is joy in loving one another. And for me, that is my faith. And so I start there every morning. I prioritize because I have to conserve my energy, and every morning it's feet hit the floor, then the knees hit the floor, but then it's the only way I know how to live, right? Because it gives me that peace, that comfort, that hope that goes beyond this life. But if you've never lived your best life, what is your best life? I would say, what does that look like? Because if you're metastatic, you're going to have challenges you may not be able to do, or you may be able to do, but reconciling that and saying, okay, reality, this is what I can do. How do I find joy and happiness in that, and living the best I can? For me, it would be very different than someone else, but you get today, and you can do it today, and hopefully you'll get tomorrow. And you just we say this a lot. I get asked when I go in the office, how's today? And I'm like, one foot in front of the other, so it's putting one foot in front of the other and trying. And maybe you're successful at it one day and you're not, but you'll tune into what is. That's the only way I know how to answer that question. Maybe you get a different insight.
Oh, the advice I'd give wouldn't be as good as yours, but the thing that I've seen and watched since your diagnosis is that you have narrowed the field, honed in, reprioritized, and made your faith number one, and then evaluated the other things that you were going to have be important in your life, and the things you were going to let slide as being not important, and watch those fade away, and then see what you could do about putting goals out there that made you feel alive and made you feel like you were in the right place, doing the right thing. And some of that has to do with helping others and serving and that sort of thing. but it's that prioritization coming from the narrowing of the focus that was brought on by the fact that you, at the time you were diagnosed, you didn't know how long you had, but from then on, it was going to be, I'm going to do things that are important to me and important to my family and important to my religion, and that's it. So you kind of got to know yourself first in order to live your best life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying. I'm not successful at it every day. I don't think anyone is, but why not start? I mean, why would you not want to have your best life, even in the face of we're all going to die? You don't know when. I'm just, some of us may have some window of idea, but it doesn't, just like the earlier thing, it's like, it's not good enough for me to be 40%, but I have to acknowledge when I'm only 40% and I'm not going to surpass that. We're there. So reset expectations. And then how do I live my best life with that 40%? And I will juggle some things around again, and it's just, that part sucks. I'm not going to lie. That part is challenging for me, but I can either rise to the occasion and have the best life that I can, or I can pout about it, be angry about it, and be a miserable human being for the rest of my days. And I can't do that.
Yep.
Can't do that.
I obviously I'm not living it, and I'm not living with it. From the outside looking in, what I have found as the patterns, and I get to kind of sit and observe patterns with lots of people. Taking the steps to have make it an active process, right? The things that are done for you, you're choosing, right? The things that you're pursuing, you're actively. I think what I see is when people, right, you're losing a lot of yourself. You've spoken to that. Yeah. You're losing a lot of independence. You're losing, your goals and ideas and visions have changed over time. But I think that you get to maintain some of that if you take an active role in your treatment, your process, your disease, and the things that are being recommended, right? I mean, we've said it before, but I really don't like to. I advocate for people to be done for, not done to.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a big deal, and it's the reason that this field exists, is to help people understand that there are options and there are alternatives and there are ways to think through this. And I think one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing, and one of the reasons that PINK exists, is to help people maintain some control of an otherwise uncontrollable situation.
Yeah.
That's what I see from the outside. I don't want to. I obviously can't speak and live in those shoes, but so that's what part does faith play in increasing your quality of life? I think you addressed it. I don't know if you want to dig into it more.
It is. I could not get up and live my best life without my faith. Right. Like, it is the only, and I will say this, like, you can have friends and you can have family, but I can't explain it. I wish I could, but to be able to experience, even in the midst of all of the crud, right? Like, it's not fun, right? You hurt constantly, and some days you're hurting so bad you're puking, and it's a challenge. My life is not easy. I mean, like, I try to show up and make it look easy sometimes, and that's not trying to be dishonest. It's just trying to be the best me. But to have such, in all of that midst of chaos and suffering, and to have the ability to tap in and overwhelmingly have joy and comfort and feel it and connect with my God is an amazing comfort, and I couldn't do what I do if I didn't have my faith and didn't make that my number one priority. And it never fails. I mean, every morning it's like some different communication that I feel like, okay, got my answer. This is how I'm going to start the day. So it's important, it's vital, and it is absolutely necessary for me. It works for me. And I wish I could explain how I can feel held from a higher power and know that there's hope.
This isn't all there is.
This isn't all there is when I'm done here, right? So I kind of look at it as, well, I've just always been an overachiever, so I'm just going to go home sooner, right? So I've done my work here. When he takes me, I will have finished. But where else would I get that hope? Because this isn't it for me. And I know that there will be a day, I know it. I won't have pain. I won't have suffering. And we teach, I get to, right, a lot as a reframe thing we use in the retreat. And it dawned on me about a month ago, and I'm like, I've been teaching I get to, and I get to go meet Jesus, right? So it's like, how can I not celebrate that and look forward to that? I don't want to die early, but I get to meet my maker. And it's like, that's an awesome experience that brings me joy, brings me comfort, brings me peace. So to have all of that, to feel the love, to know that I have mercy, and all of that is the best feeling in the world. So that's how my faith helps me. Sorry. So hope that answers that.
That answers it for me.
Is that clear enough?
So there's one here that says advice or suggestions on how to help others in this end stage. I wonder, are we talking about from Dave's perspective?
Yeah. Go ahead and talk on one.
I have what?
Yeah, and I will be, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to say our second, so two talks ago was a partner's perspective discussion with Dave and Brad answering a lot of those questions. So I think Dave, absolutely you can dig into that, but I would direct everybody to the website. I think it's it must be number 2.
Yeah,
if that's right. Yeah.
One,
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's just strictly directed to me. I mean, it actually sounds like a question for somebody that's actually going through it, as opposed to a support mechanism, or a supporter. What I would recommend if somebody wants to know what has worked for us in helping somebody that's going through the end stage is the cliched thing of making sure that communication has happened and is happening, so that you know what it is that's important to whoever it is that you're caring for, and then doing the best you can to make sure that those needs, wants, and preferences are met. Because for me and for the things I do to help Cynthia, it's all based on the fact that we've had so many conversations over the years that we've faced this, that I feel 100% comfortable with the absence of the kidney problem.
Yeah.
That I know exactly what she wants, where she wants to go, how she wants to be treated, who can get in the room and who can't, and that sort of thing, so that I'm not going to be burdened after she's gone with, did I do the right thing for her? I'm executing the plan that she and I put together that's based on what she wants.
Right.
So that's my recommendation.
Ideally, you are a surrogate decision maker, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean, when you can't speak for yourself, it doesn't mean you make decisions that you would like her to pursue. Your job is to carry out her known wishes and be her voice
Yeah.
when she can't speak for herself.
Yeah, and see, and I think I said this in that earlier podcast that we were talking about. What a gift, because I'm a worrier and somebody that thinks about things after they've happened, and then I can't sleep at night. Imagine if you were making decisions for the person that you loved the most in the world, and they passed, and you wondered if you were doing the right thing at the right time for what they wanted. I mean, it'd be something that you couldn't get over the rest of your life. So, anyway, yes?
I would back up there in that's totally, you're right, end of life. But there are things that I take that question as, what can you do while they're here too, right? Like, how do you best support your friend or your loved one that is going through this diminishing capacity, right? Whatever that is.
No, that's true.
And, you know, we have a funny story. I mean, we're just a little odd. Let's just face it.
Yeah, we know.
And we've been married 25 years and never done each other's laundry, right? Ever. He does his, I do mine. Like he said, when he had his knee surgeries, I was having him pump him full of drugs because I didn't want him to hurt, right? But when he got home, I'm like, I'm not doing your laundry. You got to figure out how to do your own laundry. So here he is on crutches and got a rope, hooked it to his laundry basket, and there he goes, hopping along to the laundry room to do his own laundry. I'm like, quality of life. If you don't plug into life, you're going to impact me too, right? That's the way we look at things.
And part of the way that she lives her best life is that she has never put a dish into the dishwasher.
That's true.
That's
I leave little nuggets.
But that's a
in the
whole
sink.
nother story.
Yeah.
Even though it's only like a foot and a half away from the sink.
Yeah. At least don't spill water on the floor. But anyway, so I was struggling because I can't lift now. I mean, like, again, body's not allowing me to do it. And so being the wonderful man that he is, he started out trying to let me lift it and take it in for you. And it was really, and he wanted to so do my laundry for me. And I'm like,
no, I wanted to carry it into the lawn.
yeah. But then anyway, so I was like, I don't even like that. And he saw it. He was like, I'm trying to do something nice here, but it's bothering her. And so Amazon come to the rescue, and it's like they have laundry baskets on wheels that you can just roll in. So I don't need him to do I don't need that. So you find ways to keep the independence. No different than if you're an aging person with arthritis or, any other ailment. You don't want to lose that independence. You want to be the best you that you can be. And if there's a way to do it, do it. Right. And I'm just fortunate to have a partner that recognizes it, even sometimes when I don't. I was just getting irritated, and he figured out why. So, yeah. So I do my own laundry now still.
And I think what I would add to that, again, as the outsider looking into the situation, is that I think active listening is really important. And I think giving, either opening a door conversationally for somebody who's going through the disease process, or just giving an active ear, because a lot of the conversations that you guys have had and that we've had and you've had with your doc, lots of people are not having those conversations. And it's probably lots of times because they don't feel that there's a safe space to do that. And so I think being an active listener and providing a safe space to talk about the things that are uncomfortable for lots of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets a lot more uncomfortable if you were to get farther into this process and you weren't able to speak from the knowledge of who she is and what she wants and what you guys have talked about. And so, I just think having the conversations or really even just listening to somebody else open up. And I think everybody needs a safe space. And if that's a person or a group of people, or there's lots of resources we can down the road talk about. Obviously Project Pink is an excellent community resource, but there's lots of resources out there. They're not as prominent up front and easy to find as we would all like them to be, but there are things out there that can help. So again, we have other talks coming down the road where we kind of dig in to those resources a little bit more, but that's kind of a 3-person perspective of answering that question, and all from different viewpoints of the process. So Cynthia, your 40% is like 150% of the rest of us.
Oh, that's sweet for you.
Do you have any suggestions on how to re-engage in the world?
That's so hard, but I'm a planner. Now that we're in this phase, I'm finding it more challenging because it's hard to plan because you don't know how your day's going to go. Depends on where you're at. I would say, 6 years ago, it was pretty easy for me to stay engaged. And as it's gotten worse, it's harder. And you just have to do it. And for me, and Dave and I had lots of talks about this, and even talks with you, Clay, it's prioritization. And so many people think you have to conserve that energy, which we talked about on the last Straight Talk. I've never had to conserve energy. I've been the Energizer Bunny, right? I'm finding that I have to learn how, right? And I don't do it well. But I pay for it tremendously. And then the cycle continues where you disappoint people because you have to cancel, or you have to say no, or everything in your life becomes so unpredictable. And so I re-engage when I can, and I would encourage everyone that's the survivor going through this disease to give first yourself grace, and process what that norm may be different. I'm learning I should be an expert on redefining my new norm by now, but it doesn't make it any easier. And it takes me a little while. It might take me a week to get my head around something and then figure out, let's try this. And I think that's the reason the meds are so hard, because it's like, it's something new, and it's like, is it going to drag out a week or two to give it a fair shot? And then am I giving up 2 weeks of being like everything to me is a give up if I lose a day. It's like, I just lost a day. I mean, I'm that analytical, and I'm like, 10 days off for the kidney surgery. So I lost 10 days. I lose 8 hours a day for sleep. I mean, like, I literally calculate how much of my life I'm losing. I'm like, I can sleep when I'm dead. So, it's just one of those things. But I would just say, it's prioritization first for me, and prioritizing what's important. My faith, my family, Pinked, my friends, certainly. But really, you could wrap up faith, family, but it's really serving others, because I believe I was put on this earth to serve. And I don't, I get such great joy in doing that. And I don't even necessarily do it well all the time, but it helps me to learn from others, to help others, to know that I'm not alone. They're not alone. And we make the world a better place. And I know that sounds oversimplified, but prioritization and letting people know, and it's communication, but this is the hard part that I don't do well with, I'll be honest. I'm better at it with him. Letting people know that you aren't 100%, right? Like, I don't want to cancel on people. I don't want to ignore people. Most people don't realize right now I have a vision issue because of the brain tumors, and the brain lining is diseased. So it's hard for me sometimes to see text. So I'm not on my phone as much. I'm not on the computer as much. I'm not able to do the things I love to do because my priority is sitting down and talking with God every morning. So that has to take priority. And if that's all the reading I get in the day, that's my choice. And I don't want to apologize for it, but I never want to make anyone feel bad that I didn't text them back. So there's that grace that I need to give myself, but grace that I need from others, tremendously, because no, I'm not mad at you. No, yes, I miss you, of course. I'm sorry I don't have the hours in the day that I used to have to be in that social circle that I used to be. I'm not pulling away. I just only have so many good hours in me. And that, so I would encourage anyone that's going through it, prioritize, try to communicate and let people know. But if you're on the other side of it like you, and you can speak better to this than me, that I will say, I don't do it well asking what I need, but that's what I need. I need easy, because life isn't easy. And so that's the best I can answer that question. Do you have anything to add?
Well, from an evaluation standpoint, I think the thing that helped you the most get through this is the engagement in helping others. I mean, that was a prioritization that you made of all the things you talked about. But the thing that I saw help you keep it together was the engagement with others.
Yeah.
Helping
Yeah.
the things you did to start painting
Yep.
the two-way street that's been in terms of
Yes.
how much you've given and how much you've gotten back from the people that you've helped.
What better way to live than to be able to impact someone? I remember, and I know Melinda's in this room, but I remember the first year of Pink, and we were just dreaming. And we said if we could help one person, it would be worth it.
Success.
Yeah, success. So that's what life's about.
Right.
You just try to pave the way easier for someone else. So, yeah. Makes life better for everyone.
I'm going to come back to that question. I'm going to ask you a question first. Right, you're talking about your limitations move closer, right? I mean, it's like you can't do what you used to, and you recognize that. And people can take that information and be angry and bitter with that. And that hinders, I would think, living life to the fullest, right? Taking advantage of every day, because so I don't know if it's even possible, but how do you deal with that loss of independence and not? I mean, you're a great example of you've taken a negative and turned it into an amazing positive, but that's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you not let that anger and frustration kind of run the show?
I mean, don't get me wrong, I can get angry. Like the kidney thing I was angry about for a hot minute, right? But I've tried to go back to the tools that were given to me years ago. And first of all, say it's my choice. I can choose to be angry and stay there, or I can choose to step up, because if I don't and I stay there, I'm impacting the person that I love and all those people that are in my life that I love and care for. That to me, I take to heart. And it's just, it boils down for me as an analytic, A or B, 1 or 0. It's a choice, and I can't stay there because it makes me feel horrible. And then if I stay there, then it's like, okay, what do I do to get out of it? Right? I've got to have tools to get out of it. And there are a few things that trip my trigger that make me feel as close to heaven as I can be in the real world. And I draw on those experiences. And even when they're a challenge, everyone knows I have a border collie, love my dog, go to the farm, and I'm not great at it, but we herd, work stock, sheep. And I'm fortunate enough that my friends out there are family, and they see it's harder, and they know I can't walk as far. So I get on the rhino and they drive me out to the post. And so we accommodate, and I'm grateful that we can still accommodate, right? Like I can still do it. I just have to alter the way I do it. I can be mad about it. And maybe for 15, 20, 30 minutes, or even I'm going to be mad about it because I don't want to be a burden. That's when I get angry. I don't want to be a burden and be that girl with cancer. I want to be that girl that goes out to the farm with just her dog, right? Just a girl and her dog. And so I don't want it to define me. And if I let anger in too long or sadness, it defines who I am. And that's not why I'm put on this earth. And so I lean on the tools and I know what works that literally brings me out of that. And I have to make that happen. And it's always with his help. So, and friends. So it's a choice.
It goes back to you prioritizing what you're willing to do and how much time you're willing to give up, and being mad about the fact that you got cancer or whatever the limitations are of what stage it's in has been, I've seen you do it. You just hand it off and move on.
I mean, it's like I get angry that I have to sleep because, like I said, I can sleep when I die. Well, I don't need to be angry. What value? I mean, I need to process that and not run from it and say, why am I angry and how do I do this? But it's always from a perspective of how do I get out of it? I don't want to be here because I don't like how this feels. This is not I don't want to be that person. I don't. And it's easy to be that person.
It goes back to the thing you talk about. It's your choice. You can't change the fact that you have cancer or some facet of it, but you can choose how you deal with it.
Right. And I think that's why that question is so hard of, are my expectations unrealistic? I need my doctors to answer that honestly, because that's part of the process of me accepting that new norm or defining it and then accepting it, right? It's like, I'm not going to get any better. I'm not going to get more. I'm not going to be able to go and walk the 12 miles. That's not possible anymore. So I need to accept that, but that's going to take me a little bit. But what can I do, right? There's something I can do. I'm not in the bed 24/7 yet. So what can I do and how do I manage that, conserve that energy? And what's frustrating is it changes so much on us now. It's a moving target all the time. And that probably for me is when I get frustrated the most, because I want to make plans, but then it's just like, oh my gosh, I feel horrible. I'm so tired. I can't, or I'm hurting, or this or that or the other. So we haven't leveled out this new norm. And every time we go through a new process, it's frustrating because I feel like I'm disappointing and not being the person that I want to be. Right.
And I think part of the hard part is that you find that new norm and then it's going to move on you.
It will.
Right. And that's what we kind of talked about in the beginning is like, I think all the plans should be written in sand and not in stone, because you got to be able to pivot and adapt to kind of what's coming your way. But I mean, in my mind, everything you're speaking to is taking an active role. Yeah. Right.
I can't lay down and let this take. It doesn't. I keep having to say it does not define me. I can't change it. What's going on? I can just show up. I can say, you know what? I'm here. So I'm here for a purpose. I need to find that purpose and how I'm supposed to plug in that day in whatever way I can. And to me, that's active, right? That's living. And I'm going to live. I'm not waiting to die. And I'm going to live until I do. And that's it.
I think it's a part of your experience, but it's not a part of it's not who you are.
No.
Right? And that's, I can imagine that's a hard place to get to and to then maintain that, right? To maintain that as that needle moves or as your new baseline changes. Yeah.
The more frequent it gets, the harder it gets, right? You want to stay there. And I like change and I'm struggling with it, right? So I think as you progress in the disease and it moves faster, the trajectory gets steeper, it gets a little harder because the changes the new norm has to be reset quicker. And you're just like, really? I didn't even have 2 months to stay in this phase, and then now I'm in this phase. So that's hard. But then for me, the challenge is, okay, I got to speed up my response because it doesn't change anything. And that's why that question for me is so important. It's just I need honesty, right? So I can be proactive in how I approach and what's realistic, because I also have to weigh the risk of whatever I do, and can I go do this without putting myself at risk and an extra burden on him? Yep. right? Because it's not fair to him the kidney thing wouldn't be fair to him, because why should he deal with that, right? So we compromise on a lot, but you're constantly, I don't know about other survivors, but I'm constantly thinking about what load of burden I'm putting on him and my family and friends.
And that is a very common, one of the most common concerns that I hear from people who are approaching the end of life. Right?
Yeah.
Above all else, right? I don't want to be a burden.
Yep.
And all loved ones and family and friends, you're not a burden, right? This is a gift. We get to provide the care that you've given to us. But
It is.
That's the it's the concern. That's the concern that lots of people have.
It is. I mean, it's just like, I'm not saying it's not an honor, but having gone through this like 4 times with people and really down deep with 3 being there for long periods of time in hospice to their very last breath. It is a burden, not one that you don't get honor from and not one that's not a privilege, but it's a big burden, even, like with my parents, and it changes who you are. It did me. So I pull from that experience, and I'm trying so hard to control that, right? And I know I can't. I intellectually know I can't, sure. But I'm like, oh, I'm trying, but it's a little bit of, I know that I'm a burden, but I'm doing the best I can not to be. That makes sense.
This is another one for you, Cynthia, and I mean, all I can do is pontificate on this, so I'm going to pass this off to you. But how do you keep your minds from overthinking?
Why don't you go with that one? I've been talking too much. I've been just like.
How do you keep your mind from overthinking, Cynthia?
I don't. I overthink. That's the answer. I don't. No, we do.
We're better at it than we used to be. But we talked several times here lately about the fact that we were given the gift from a certain point after diagnosis of some of the early treatments that we didn't even think about the fact that you were a breast cancer survivor. I mean, it sort of passed away from us. And some of the tools we had early in trying to get out of that mode, they kind of went by the wayside as far as I was concerned when we got re-diagnosed. And it became something that was omnipresent in daily life. And like I said, when we started this, we and I certainly am not an expert on how to psychologically deal with bad stuff that happens to you. But the way that we have dealt with it is to put positive things out in front of us that we look forward to. And that's the stuff we focus on. We're going to take this trip. We're going to go over here. We're going to do something with the grandkids and focus on that and not let it get to the point where we don't have any of those out there and make that the focus. Because, again, like Cynthia said several times, there's nothing you can do about where we're at, but there's a lot you can do about the choices you make about how to deal with it. And
yeah, and I would say from my perspective on overthinking, I do think we overthink when we are put in a position of decision making. We both are guilty of that. We will analyze something to the nth degree, but it's what necessary for us to get to a place of peace, right? Of, okay, we're doing this, not looking back, and we've approached that since day one of our very first diagnosis. Why are you laughing?
We're not going to make this decision
10 times.
10 times, yeah.
Yeah, we're not. We don't want to revisit that.
What you're saying is right. What we analyze it to the level that we feel like we're comfortable with what we need to know about it, and then we let it go.
Yeah, and I think for us, like, we use the box, the worry box concept, where you put, put it in a box, and we'll pull it out at the doctor's appointment. And that works for the most part, but I find that it's not working as well in the last couple of months because it's moving, just things are changing so rapidly and decisions are having to be made more often than not. So I think that that's a challenge. It's like you said, it's omnipresent. It's just there all the time. Our lives are, it's hard not to feel like your life is being controlled by cancer, right? Like you wake up, what do you have today? I don't like that. I will be honest. I fight that. I don't like it. I have to go and get on my knees in the morning for that one, right? But I will say that there is guidance in scripture, and I hold on to this one, and I can't repeat it verbatim. I'll get it wrong. But basically, today's enough to worry about. You don't need to worry about tomorrow. Yep. I can't handle more. And tomorrow may change anyway. So today is it. I'm going to just focus on today. And people can say be in the present moment, do whatever they want to do. For me, Jesus's words are powerful enough. And he's telling me, don't worry about tomorrow. Just today's worries are enough. And that's how I center every morning, because you wake up and you're thinking about it. It's not like you don't think about it. And so how do I process that? And I review that scripture every morning and just say, today's enough. Today is that. If that was good enough for Jesus, it's going to be good enough for me. So that's the tool that I use. So, and yeah, we have to shelf it. Otherwise it's all consuming, right? It's just getting more consuming, because when you don't have to go to the doctor as much, it's easier to put in a box. When you're there all the time, it's harder.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just going to look through. I think we probably have touched on a lot of these questions that were submitted prior. There's a question about coping skills. Everybody's got them. Some are great, some are not so great. But I'm assuming the question really, let's ask, what have been your effective coping skills? Or you, Dave?
Yeah.
There's a lot coming at you guys.
No specific skill set that I use comes to mind. What do you see me do?
Oh, I see you try to stay into a normal routine as much as possible. Like we're both big advocates. Even when I was going through treatment the first time, I was like, you need to go golf. You need to go do this. Keeping as much normalcy as possible, because the cancer's going to be here when you get back, right? So I don't want him to feel like, and he doesn't, that he's got to be under, he's a little more protective, obviously, but going and having breakfast with his kids, or, playing golf, or meeting his friend for lunch, right? Keeping that normalcy of routine, I think, is important for you.
But I don't, the reason that I guess I was not connecting with the question related to coping skills is that, and Cynthia and I have had this conversation a bunch, for whatever reason, and, it's life experiences and how you interpret it and that sort of thing. But I've told Cynthia on multiple occasions that I feel like I'm in the right place at the right time, doing what I was meant to do, and being a caregiver and a good husband to her at this time in her life is what the other experiences I had pointed me toward. And so I don't need a coping skill to do what what I feel like I was destined to do, and what I'm here for. So it's the things she talks about me, just keeping some regularity into it. Yeah, I do that kind of stuff, and it does, clear your head a little bit. But it's more if you feel like you're doing the right thing and you're in the right place for you, it's not something that you need to cope with, at least the way I look at it.
That's well said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a few more on here that I think are worth touching. I'd like to understand how others handle the quality of life questions, especially around our ongoing treatment and how it impacts our daily lives. I don't know that there's I think the answer to that is everything we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But I just think it's an important question because there is no you're not going to look that up and find out a definition of quality of life, right? And we all define that differently. And I think we've talked in previous talks, like some people say, if I can open my eyes and see my grandkids, anything above that, I'm okay with, right? And other people, if I can't go to the bathroom on my own, if I can't put my own pants on, that's not a quality of life. Anything less than that is not an appreciable quality of life to me.
That's right.
And you've had a fairly clear idea of what that looks like for you.
I do.
And that's probably had to move and be redefined a little bit as time goes on.
Yeah, to get to the point you can't carry your laundry basket to the laundry, you know what I mean? I'm like, really? Not being able to walk with, and no, I can't walk long distances because that was therapy for me, right? And also time with friends or family or whatever. Again, it's a slap in the face, and it's just another reminder you're not winning this one. You're not getting out of this one, right? So it gets harder. It does get harder.
But you think upstream from your current, where we are now, you as does everybody going through treatment goes through some crappy stuff, right? And probably in the throes of that, what the hell am I going through? This is not a quality that, right? And so having vision that there's an other side to that is a different consideration than where you're at now in thinking about quality.
Absolutely. We've evaluated stuff and tried stuff back in the day that we wouldn't touch right now because of where I'm at, right? And again, I want to say to every survivor out there, it doesn't mean I want to quit.
Right.
It just means that I still want more for myself, and I want more good days than bad days. And maybe people can call me a wimp even, right? That it's like, oh, well, she's not even willing to do X, Y, and Z. Well, it's like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm willing to do and try stuff that makes sense, but but I need to understand that burden, because if it's too high, and it depends on where you're at in your journey on how that's answered, the answer is probably right now, no, right? Like when we evaluated the stents, it's like 6 months ago or a year ago, I'd be like, yep, let's do it. Probably, yeah. I felt better. Right now, it's not so good. So it's just like, okay, am I going to even have to replace these things? So I'm going to go in and lose, however much time. And so we weigh that, and weighing that, and it goes back to the burden and benefit thing, right? And treatment does, how do I say this? A longer life for me does not necessarily mean a higher quality of life.
Right.
For me, for us. And that's the way I look at it. Right, wrong, or indifferent, but that's what works for us. And so
I think using the stents is a good example, right? If you went to that visit and they said, we're gonna put this in, it's gonna hurt for 10 days, you're gonna recover. And then every month you're gonna be in, it's not it's a hypothetical, but if instead of saying every 90 days we need to have you back, if it's every 30 days, that probably changes that evaluation a little bit, right?
it absolutely
or
does.
even because then you say, well, I'm doing a procedure, I spend 10 days feeling like crap, I get 10 days of feeling good, and then I'm back to do it all over again. And so, and some people that's meaningful and valuable, and other people are going to say,
no,
it's too much time on the table in the doctor's office doing stuff.
Yeah, because I think what people don't realize on the outside that aren't going through it or not immediately going through it is they don't realize that something like a stent will cause how many appointments, how much time going to and from the doctor, how much time going for the procedure. It's like when you add all of that up, it's even more than what you think. Oh, no big deal, I'm going to go to the doctor's appointment. Well, if you're there 3 hours, and then by the time you have the procedure and you add another 10 hours, it adds up. And so that inconvenience, while it's an inconvenience, at some point it becomes a burden depending on your goals and where you're at in your disease. Yeah. It is the way I look at that. And that's how we evaluate it. It's, okay, what are we going to get? And again, I want my cake and eat it too. And I have to reset that. But with that reset, everything's looked at differently with the reset, right?
Yep.
So even if it was the same procedure, when we do this again in 3 months, we will have to look at it again and say, do we do it? Right? I mean, 10 days is not.
Yeah, because you're looking at what else is going wrong.
What else is going wrong?
The situation
the situation's not going to be
exactly,
the same. Right?
Exactly. So I'm not going to have someone be putting stents on me if I got 30 days left. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, yeah, no, let's just let nature take its course. So it depends on holistically what's going on with the body at the time and the disease.
And asking the right questions, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that really advocating for yourself, right?
Yes.
Because the guy putting the stent in it's no big deal. We do this all the time. I do 40 a week. Well, you're one of 40 in a week, right? But for you, that's 100% of your experience. And so I think while we can talk, risk and complications, and here's what the data shows, and here's 1 out of 10,000, whatever it is. Doing the procedure, it's fairly low risk, but
there's a risk.
Yeah, and it's you're not going through it. You're not one of 40. You're one of one, and that experience, is meaningful. And so I think if people can really just start to ask open-ended questions about what is being offered, they'll start to find themselves in a decision-making situation that you guys have. There's a lot of people that say, well, they said I have to do this, this, and this, and it's it. That's whether that's out of fear or whether that's out of true desire or they did not, but that's where you end up getting done too, and I think where none of us want to find ourselves. I think so.
Yeah, advocating for yourself, to your point, is a big part of living your best life, because it presupposes that what you've done is evaluate what's important to you, and then you go in not just dealing with the medical community, but you're advocating with your caregivers and the rest of the world. This is what I want out of my life, and it's just it's how you get there, I think, as far as living your best life.
And I'll sum up something that I think is important, and I'm helping someone right now, and that's in a struggle, and just when in doubt, it's like no matter what doctor knew, because this was a new doctor coming onto my team, right? He needed to know what my goals were and where we were at and what we wanted for quality of life, and that was our number one goal. He needed to have a level set of what, and he did, like, my palliative care doctor had a great conversation with him, but it's important for them to know what your goals are right off the bat from the very first meeting, and they change. And so when they change, they need to know that.
Yep.
And if you don't feel like you're getting the time in the office, I highly encourage people to write a note on a Friday before their appointment the next week to give that, because a lot of the doctors are really getting into reading those emails and just say, here's the goal I want to come out with that appointment, and here's what I'm struggling with, and here's a day in my life. You don't have to write a novel, but you can just say, okay, I wake up, I'm taking pills, then I have to stay flat for 2 hours, then I'm on ice for an hour. Painting that picture, because if they don't know that, they're only seeing your best foot forward. Because I promise you, when I'm in that office, it's my best foot forward. I'm not faking it. But even if I'm saying I'm struggling with this, she's not getting what that means in my daily life.
Right.
And so if they understand, because immediately within 2 hours, I got a phone call when I sent that email of, here's my day. and this is not acceptable to me. Is this, you know, is there something we can do? So I think, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but relating it to a real day in the life of what you're experiencing and what you're losing out on. It made it really clear she knew I wasn't at that, I shouldn't be at that stage yet, right? So
Right.
she knew she had to kick in gear and do a new regimen. So
I think we've covered most of the kind of the previous submitted questions. Are there things that you either of you want to talk about or ask me or ask each other? Are there decisions that you're faced with now or upcoming in the future that, you know, you might not want to do that publicly, and that's okay. But
we said we would be honest. You go first. I've been talking a lot.
I know that's just the norm for us. As you talk, I'll think of what I need to say.
Oh my gosh. How do you navigate? And I mean, I think we try, but you deal with this more than we do. But I learned something this past week when the three of us were talking together, and I had no idea that something that I was doing that I absolutely loved bothered him because it put me at risk physically, right? And how do you navigate best those conversations with that? You know what I mean? Like there's compromise and there's this and there's that, but is it just, is there something we can do better about? I mean, like we talk about it, but I'm sitting here and I don't want to, he doesn't want me to give up the stuff I love. I don't want to give up the stuff I love, but I also don't want, there's that balance of I don't want to cause something and then if I break something, they can't fix it. I would be bedridden. And so it's just like, you know.
I think a lot of it is kind of risk mitigation, right? I mean, if you said, this activity, this thing we're talking about makes me, I mean, I don't want to get out of bed if I can't go do that.
Yeah.
And for Dave's, you know, it wouldn't be, but if his response was, well, I have no peace of mind when you're out doing that and we can't do it anymore, right? Can you go do it like you did 2 years ago?
No.
Probably not. Do you need to give it up totally? Probably not, right? Because what has that done for your, like if that's what
Right.
you live for, and I'm
Mhm.
not saying that, but just
Yeah.
to take it to the extreme, what value do you get by mitigating the risk to the point where you're not doing it and you're you know, now something that brought you a lot of pleasure
Mhm.
and joy, we've taken off the table for fear of something that may or may not happen as a consequence, right? And it's a hard, and there isn't a right or wrong. And I mean, I think the other night we might have talked about the example of aspiration, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
somebody gets a little bit weaker, gets a little bit sicker, they start to have more trouble swallowing, and now the risk of aspiration or food or drink going down the wrong tube into the lungs is a concern, right? So the way we mitigate that in healthcare, non-hospice, non-palliative healthcare, is that we say, well, we're going to thicken your liquids. So you put a you know, a product in that's, and you can thicken it up to different consistencies. So like syrup, and we're going to puree all your foods, and there you go, right? And then you see people, they eat less, they drink, because it's like, if you've
No.
ever seen somebody eat a pureed salad,
No.
not a chance, right? But this is what we do because we say, well, we can't do something that we know is high risk because you failed your swallow study. We watched the barium go down where we didn't want it. So we have to do these things to mitigate that risk, but we don't put a lot of consideration to the quality of life that we're creating or diminishing. So, you know, in the palliative world, in the hospice world, I'm going to say that risk is known. Let's do some things that we can do to mitigate that. But I also know if I thicken your liquids and puree your food, you're not going to eat.
Yeah.
And now we've taken something away from you that brings you joy and pleasure and comfort. And if you were to say, I want that, eating is as much for pleasure and comfort as it is for sustenance. So let me eat what I want. It's an experience that I need from a quality of life standpoint. If I aspirate, don't rush me to the hospital and fix the problem, because I'm accepting the risk that that outcome may occur, because the value I get out of eating real food is worth it to me. And everybody's got to answer that on their own a little bit.
Yeah. So it's just continuing the communication and coming to an agreement.
Yeah, and I'm
reevaluating all the time.
That conversation was an unknown, right?
Yeah.
You had no idea
No, I didn't. I was like, what?
that he had concern, and but then you sat and talked through it a little bit, and but I think that's where you get to say it's meaningful to me, even if I can't walk. If you can take me out there,
Yep.
if you can, if you put me in I forget the name of the
Rhino.
in the Rhino, and I can go even see with my eyes, right? That's my experience, and that's a conversation I think now you guys are going to be able to have going forward.
And it will change.
Right.
It will change as it, but at least, it's
But I
finding
think
different ways to do it.
you happened upon that because you have an open
Yes.
line of communication.
And I was manipulating her to some extent. Anyway, with
Nice.
you're going to work in the flat pasture today, right?
That's right.
And,
But that's
just minor little
Right.
adjustments.
That's the happy medium give and take mitigation that you come up with, is that she still gets to go do that,
Right.
but you get to help her find ways to do that in a little bit safer way that gives you some peace of mind.
Comfort.
It's an ongoing discussion. You guys are just great examples of how to have real, ongoing, legitimate discussions about things that you're facing. Right?
We're trying.
So it was interesting for me to watch that you because you're a textbook example in my world that I use, not by name, but I use you guys as how well it can be done.
Thank you.
But you hit on something you never knew.
No.
And it was interesting for me to be an observer in that situation.
Yeah.
Because I thought for sure you guys have covered it all. But
No,
there
didn't
you go.
cover that one. No.
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
See, like I said, listening to her.
Yeah.
So I generally overestimate how well prepared I am for stuff. So from your world, what do you see in the 11th hour, the mistakes that caregivers make that they wish they wouldn't? What kind of mistakes are out there that I need to make sure I avoid in the 11th hour? Even though that we think we got a plan, we've already established that plans are important, but at some point there's things that crop up that you weren't mentally prepared for, or that weren't part of the plan. So
that's a tough one. I wouldn't call it a mistake, but what I often see people getting into from a caregiver's role is so deep into the weeds of the caregiving and advocating, because everybody needs an advocate, right? And when somebody can't advocate for yourself, you as a caregiver, you step into that role. So getting so deep into the caregiving and the molecules of medicine and this and that you lose or miss or overlook the opportunity to be a loving husband, right? To be a spouse, and you have to take on that caregiving role to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But there's lots of resources available to help ease that burden, to help ease that commitment. I think the mistake where I wish that people could do it over is accepting more of that help, because you only get to do this once, right? I mean, and when we were talking earlier, this is Cynthia's story, but it's it's
his story.
You're part of that story, and so I want everybody's experience to be as meaningful and peaceful and comfortable as possible. But you can't do it alone. So I think the biggest mistake I see people making is that they're not accepting, whether that's a distrust of the healthcare system, which is a big deal, whether that's pride and ego getting in, whatever the case may be, accepting help. And if that's help from families, if that's help from the hospice team, if that's help from faith community, whatever that looks like,
Okay.
you know, you know, keep that circle sometimes fairly small, but not a circle of one,
Okay.
right? Or even two, I think. The help exists. It's the biggest thing I think is people just for whatever reason aren't as willing to accept the help that we all wish that people were. So.
Okay.
It's interesting you say that because I think, in final comments, I think everyone's trying not to be a burden to someone else. So it starts with me. I don't want to be a burden to him. He doesn't want to be a burden to, talking about that
Right.
circle of one. Well, it's just like, but you don't want to be a burden to your friends or your family and all this because he feels I'm his responsibility, right? Like, and it's an honor, but it's so much. And so it's like, I think it's just people caring for one another enough that they just don't want.
And who could do it better than
Yeah.
the guy who's known you for 25 years
Exactly.
and has had these intimate conversations
Yeah.
many, many times? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the mindset too, is that
Yeah.
you can do it better than anybody else. And I do not doubt that.
Yeah.
But it's hard. And so that help comes with great value. I think.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Clay.
thank you. I
And
would
Dave.
just say, in wrap up, I mean, this whole series is I think a great benefit for all of us, right? For the community, for those of us who get to be involved in the conversation. But you and Dave do this with such grace and humility that it's an honor to be involved. And I think an excellent, like I said, I use you as a lesson, and I will continue to use you as a lesson long into the future. So it's always an honor. Today was even more so because I know it is personal.
Mhm.
It's kind of what we do at Paint,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it
Yeah.
is about being personal, and so
I can't ask others to be bold and brave and not do it myself. So, yeah, we're
well,
trying to.
I thank you both for participating and for letting me into this world with you guys, and onward and upward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for joining, guys.